In at number 10, we have got the Thyla, and the reason why I have put this creature here is for many reasons, actually. When you think about it, this is a very fast, mobile creature, which is capable of a lot of damage, and it can very easily get into bases, considering it can scale walls and vertical surfaces very easily. And although me, myself, not having too much PvP experience, I have definitely had my fair share of PvP experiences playing on PvP servers, so that is obviously why I decided to make this list, because I often talk about, well, like all the best PvE stuff, because I'm more of a PvE player, and a lot of you out there that watch the channel are as well. But I really want to demonstrate as well that if you're a PvP player watching this one, you know, I do actually think about you sometimes, and I'm making this video for you. And, you know, comment your thoughts on if you think this is accurate or not. And this is obviously just all from my experience, so your list may be different, and feel free to comment down below your list as well. But another huge advantage with the Thyla, which you may have just seen there, is that this thing has the bleed ability, and the bleed ability really does help this thing excel in combat, as it deals damage based on percentage instead of just overall damage. So no matter the health of whatever you're killing, it's still going to deal that certain percentage of damage. Absolutely OP for bosses. That's why the Deinonychus is like one of the best creatures in Ark, especially for PvP, and it is on this list, so watch out for that one. But yeah, as you can see here in just a second, I'm going to absolutely destroy this Kentro, and you can easily destroy all kinds of players as well. They're a really great SOTF creature too, because of this bleed ability. It's just a really quick and easy way to eliminate people, but due to that percent based damage instead of just overall damage. Next up, we have got the Bloodstalker, and this creature had to be on this list mainly for its traveling capabilities. And although you might think that is a just PvE thing, PvP travel is definitely still going to be very important for it. Sorry about that sentence, not remotely grammatically correct, it just muddled everything up. But what I should have said is, for travel, like, PvP players still need to travel around the Ark map, and this is a great creature for that. It's a great underwater tame. It's great for obviously going over the top of water as well. You don't necessarily just have to swim through it. You can glide across at a massive speed, which really does play to your benefit, as you probably want to be moving around quickly in any given PvP scenario. And obviously they're just great for traveling on the land as well. And you can even pick people off mounts too, which again really does play to your benefit. If you're in a PvP combat scenario, you can just pick someone off of their mount and then dispose of them as you wish. And it's a really nice and easy way to take some people out in a PvP scenario, because, you know, getting them off their mount, it means you don't really have to deal with killing the mount, you just have to deal with killing the player. So that's why this creature is here. Next up, we have got the Desmodus, and this creature had to be here. It's a really fast, efficient flyer with obviously that gliding ability, but with Sanguine Elixir. It's an absolute cheat for Tames, and it can farm blood bags, and it can also pick people off mounts as well, which again really does play a huge benefit in the PvP space. And a fair few times when I've been on an RG, someone's just come around on a Desmodus and just absolutely obliterated me, and I've done the same for some other people as well. Me on the Desmodus, someone else on an RG or like a Pteranodon or something like that flying around, and you just simply pick them off like that, because they're really fast flyers, so they can definitely catch up to things like an RG, and with the gliding ability, a Pteranodon is no real stretch whatsoever. So yes, if you're in the PvP space and you've never tamed a Desmodus yet, I would definitely recommend that you do, especially considering they spawn on Fjorda. So that is a free DLC map, so you don't need to pay for any additional DLCs like the Bloodstalker, because that thing only spawns on Gen 1 and Gen 2. Speaking of the RG, next up we do have the RG in at number 7 spot, and this creature had to be on the list. The RG is like the best creature for going out and getting all of that metal. Obviously you use a creature like the Anki for it, but for transporting all of that around, the RG is a great creature to do that. And the fact that it's saddle watch as a portable smithy, you need to repair any of your flat gear or any of your metal tools or weapons, then this is really going to play a huge benefit for you. And they can pick up a variety of players as well. All players, actually. They can't pick players off mounts, sadly, but still, if just a player's wandering a base, you can just quickly swoop in and take them out, and then dispose of them as you wish, really, unless they manage to kill your RG. But you probably want to have a high level RG in a PvP scenario, but that would also kind of be the same for a PvE one. But also, if you're in a tight situation where the RG has low health and you have a little moment of break to yourself, then you can always use that regen ability, which the RG has, to enable you to just heal up quickly. You just kill something and then eat the dead body, and then boom, really good healing. And it can even pick up 2 creatures at once, but dodos and things aren't particularly useful in the PvP space, so you're probably not really going to utilize that ability. Next up, we've got the Giga, and this would have been much higher on the list if it wasn't for another creature, but now compared to that thing, this is significantly more unreliable, let's say, than that other creature. You could probably guess what it is now if you know your Ark creatures, or if you've been around in Ark for the past year or so, or even maybe the past couple of months if you've come into contact with that creature. But with the rage buff that this creature has, it isn't as useful as it once was, because the other creature, which is later on the list, in at the number 3 spot, it doesn't have that. So it has a much more reliable amount of health, and turrets can't just pretty much instantly send this thing into a not blood rage, is it a blood rage? It's just normal rage, I guess. It will send it into a rage and it'll dismount you, and that Giga will just be useless, like that, boom, done. And they can be so easily gotten rid of with things like turrets that they're not a very reliable creature, and especially considering that other creature came out, you know, yeah, they're really great in the PvE space, but in the PvP space, I wouldn't say as much anymore due to that other creature being here. Next up, in at number 5, we have got the Pteranodon, and this creature had to be here. Okay, it is so accessible right from the get-go, and it is a really great creature for doing your first raids, as you can quickly get into a base, maybe with some grenades or possibly some C4 if you have that available to you, and then just simply do that rolling attack and just break all the structures inside and kill everyone inside. And then once their beds are gone and all of that, they can't get back and you can just take all the stuff. The only real downside is the Pteranodon's weight isn't great, so you'll probably want a higher level one so you don't end up in a sticky situation where your Pteranodon's encumbered and you really can't get out of the situation quick enough, and then somehow the other players manage to get back. It's definitely happened to some people, not really. It doesn't happen too often though, because those players will probably either leave the game or spawn at like some place and then spend ages getting back to, you know, where their base is. But I will say it can happen. It's not happened to me, but it's definitely something to be wary of with the weight stat of this thing, so you can get quickly away from that situation, because you really don't want to be in that situation for that long. You just want to get in, get all the stuff and get out, because you don't really want to cause any more trouble or inconvenience to yourself. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. But apart from that, also keep an eye on the stamina actually, because it is quite low. This is a really, really great PvP tame and will be your go-to creature ready for your first raids. Next up, we have got the Shadowmane, and it's pretty obvious why this would be a good PvP tame. It's small, it's relatively compact, and it deals a heavy amount of damage, and it can go invisible, and it has very high mobility, which are all extremely useful things in any given PvP scenario. You can quickly deal that damage and then get out of there as quickly as possible, and also you're quite low profile as you're not going for the largest creature out there. Although the next creature on the list, in at number 3 of course, is significantly larger than this thing, but it definitely has its place compared to this thing, and it deals a significantly higher amount of damage. You really can't get a small creature which is dealing more damage than a Giga. It doesn't generally work like that. These things also have the hydration buff, so you know, if you're raiding a raft base, you have that hydration buff along with you. And obviously they're really great in the water too, which actually again makes them really good for raiding raft bases. And there are so many raft bases out there actually, especially on maps like the island. It could be a really easy way if you just patrol the world borders and check for rafts like that. You can find yourself with some very easy raft base raids. Next up, we have got the Carcharodontosaurus, and you could probably guess it. I gave you a lot of hints when talking about the Giga, and again, this is just so much more reliable than the Giga in pretty much every way. It just doesn't have that rage meter, and it has a significantly higher amount of mobility, and when that blood rage ability is filled up right to the fullest, this thing deals even more damage than the Giga. So effectively it has more health than the Giga, more stamina, weight's probably about the same, but you're really not going to be concerned about weight, and it's got more health. Like, it's so much better in all of those ways, because obviously the Giga is a much older creature, so it made sense to have all of those handicaps back then. But nowadays there are just so many really powerful creatures out there that just doesn't need to happen anymore, and it's quite sensible to have a creature like this in the game. And I'm really glad that Wildcard did add it, because frankly the Giga was a little bit outdated, and maybe it should get some kind of TLC at some point. What do you think? Do you think the Giga deserves a TLC of some sort? I guess the Carcharodontosaurus kind of is the Giga TLC. You've got this creature in. But the only real hindrance is its tame method can be a little bit annoying, because it's not just a simple knockout and go. So that can be a slight hindrance. But apart from that, it is so much better than the Giga. Now, in at number 2, we have the Deinonychus. And this creature has to be on the list, okay? It deals bleed damage to bosses, and it will deal bleed damage to players, obviously. And although bosses probably aren't going to be your main focus in PvP, possibly, it may also be something of interest to you, and you'll probably want to get some bosses done to get all of that tech stuff and all of that element. They are still a quite heavy part of your PvP gameplay, although not as much of as a goal, let's say, as a PvE player, it still is something which you'll be trying to do at some point, and they generally are actually kind of a little bit harder to do on PvP because most of the obelisks and things are all turreted up. But obviously you can always use supply drops to do the same thing. So glad that this actually happened. I don't really think people should be able to build on obelisks really, but you know, hey ho, that's just generally how the PvP space works. People will just turret up bosses and then farm those, and it's really good if you do actually farm bosses, and these can be a great creature to actually farm those bosses for you. But either way, just before we get into the number 1 spot, I have a quick honorable mention because I realised I didn't put it on the list and I kind of feel a bit stupid for not including it. If you hadn't guessed, the honorable mention is the Stego, and this is so useful for turret soaking, and it is such an easy tame as well. Unless you're playing on official, it will take quite a bit to tame in terms of time, but still the tame method is a very simple: knock it out and then feed it your preferred berry, obviously being Medu berry, and then, you know, giving it maybe vegetables or kibble, depending on your level at the time. I'd usually just feed this thing Medu berries. You don't really need anything more than that, and then just leave it, and then boom, you have yourself a Stego. And the saddle was unlocked at a pretty early level as well. I think it's in 20s, around kind of trike saddle level, albeit it is a little bit higher. But yeah, this thing is so good at deflecting turrets in terms of tanking those turrets, and it's also got rider protection on it too, which again really does benefit you because it means that you're not going to get hurt by the turrets as much. Although yes, the mobility isn't the best, it still is not terrible compared to some other great tanks in a PvP scenario as well, which would be useful. And it's so accessible and so easy to tame. I really did have to include it on the list, and I don't know why I didn't actually include it in the general top 10. I had to include it as honorable mention, but it is definitely still very deserving of being in the list. And anyway, in at number 1 is the Rhyniognatha, and this is kind of a little bit of a risky take for this top 10 in my opinion, as some people will be like, yeah, it's the best, and some people will be like, no. Well, the reason why I'm putting it here, as you can pretty much raid any kind of base with a Rhyniognatha, unless it's just all tech Finanza alpha thing, but any kind of like metal base and below, it's so insane at raiding. You can just go in and just take out all of those dinos and absolutely destroy the bases with absolute ease. I kind of think it's a little bit unfair, especially considering how much they spawn on ASA, and I really think they should have waited a little bit to add the Rhyniognatha's into ASA, or at least had the spawn rates about the same, if not maybe just a little bit higher than the original Ark, because albeit that is definitely very low, but in ASA it's too high. Like, there are just, these things are everywhere, okay, and it's like, I don't really, now the south biome is definitely not an easy zone whatsoever, but at least their tame method is reasonably difficult, essentially kind of just being a little bit of a rip-off of the Reaper tame as you would take it. I don't really know what that sentence would lean to, but yeah, it's essentially just a Reaper taming clone, except it impregnates a dino and not you, and it's also a lot more expensive to get 100% effectiveness, as you need those resources which are on screen there. I also do have a more in-depth guide to actually tame this thing if you do want that, because, you know, albeit these things are very OP creatures and you're probably going to want to get one, you know, you're probably going to want to also know how to tame one if you didn't. And if you don't know how to tame a Reaper already, the only difference is it impregnates your dino and you feed it those cravings during the dino's kind of stage of the baby growing inside of it, instead of getting loads of XP. It's pretty much that simple, and also you do have to kill something first to get a pheromone for it to actually work, but you would get Reaper pheromones anyway. But I'll leave a card up here for my guide if, you know, you want to check that out. But anyway, that is the end of today's video, and I really hope that you enjoyed. As always, comment down below your top 10 favourite PvP creatures, and did you agree with this list? Especially you PvP players out there, as I really want to know from you. And I'll see you all later.